Okay, this is hopefully a quick video. Just to recap what I've learned regarding the One Ring First Edition. The One Ring Second Edition has successfully been kickstarted, and I believe it's actually gone out to shipping now, so it's very far into the production. And me and my gaming group who've been playing the One Ring First Edition, we've just concluded our campaign called the what is it? The Eye of the Storm. So the next natural progression is to move over to the One Ring Second Edition. So I just wanted to capture what I've understood and learned from the first edition. Okay, so what this video is attempting to do is not unpack everything that's in the One Ring RPG. There's a lot of content and tables and cultures and enemies and regions. There's a lot in the game itself that I won't be covering. I'm just going to touch on the mechanics, and in many ways I'm explaining them to myself for when I return to pick up and play this game in the future. So I've read the book, but over time, playing maybe the One Ring Second Edition or other RPG games, you kind of lose touch on what you were doing in the game, and returning to it helps just to have a refresher. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. It's just covering the core mechanics of all the different phases in the game, and in no ways will that substitute actually having the book. You will still need that. This is purely just going over the mechanics itself. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I'm just going to zip through here. So there's some wonderful art from John Hodgson, and some, sprinkled featured art from one of my favorite illustrators, John Howe, and a new illustrator I actually learned of from playing the One Ring, called the Jan Pospisil, I believe his name is. Right, so here's some background about the One Ring setting, very important. Your races in this role-playing game is actually called cultures. So you've got Bardings, Beornings, Dwarves, the Learning Mountain, Elves of Mirkwood, Hobbits of the Shire, and Woodmen of Wonderland. So in the game, culture is traditionally what you'd consider race in a role-playing game. In the One Ring, it's called culture, and your class in normal role-playing terms is called your calling. So it's culture and calling in the One Ring RPG. Alright. So, oh, by the way, this glossary at the back is a lifesaver while you're playing. It's like having an experienced GM just sitting next to you. So this index, I said glossary, excuse me, index. You just look up whatever word and it tells you all the pages that this on. So whichever fan sent this to Francesca Nepatello, what a legend, and I'm glad they've inserted it into the revised edition. Alright, so let's have a look at if there's anything else I can just cover. So there's creating a hero. So with creating a hero, you have, like I touched on earlier, you have culture, and then you have calling. So each culture will have different sort of starting stats. And within that culture, you have, I believe it's like different backgrounds, and that's sort of like a starting character. It kind of gives you starting stats. So you choose different backgrounds. You can see there, Word Weaver, Gifted Sense, Healing Hands, and that's just a little bit of flavor text that you can use or replace. But the main thing is it kind of gives you your starting stats, and there's sort of predefined, what is there? 6 predefined sort of starting molds you can start off with that character, and that helps you fall within the culture. So if you're playing a barding, it helps you sculpt that barding character, and those 6 give you enough variation to choose what you want to kind of create, and they give you some name suggestions and sort of your adventuring age, and just basically setting stuff. So you've got your Beornings, your Dwarves, the Learning Mountain, your Mirkwood Elves, your Hobbits of the Shire, and yeah, Woodmen of Wonderland. I love that sketch. So I think that is Jan Pospisil. Alright. So then you get your callings. So once you've created your character within those different cultures, so like your races, and then within that you have the 6 different backgrounds, then you have your calling, which is kind of like your class. So you've got Scholar, Slayer, Treasure Hunter, Wanderer, and Warden. Okay. And here they explain favorite skills and fatigue and traveling. Now traveling's got a whole bunch of roles, sort of skill checks and stuff you do when you travel. I'll cover that later. Here they just explain Valor and Wisdom. So when you start your character, you can choose to get 2 in Valor or 1 in Wisdom, and it just kind of defines if you're going to get a reward or a virtue on your starting character. The same thing when you upgrade your character, when you level them up with experience. If you level up, let's go to the character sheet. If you use experience during the fellowship phase, so advancement points is for these common skills, and experience is for Valor, Wisdom, Body, Heart, and Wits, and Weapon. If you upgrade Valor, you'll get a reward. So that could be sort of a blessing on a weapon or whatever that is, or maybe a new weapon. Or Wisdom gives you Valor, and Valor, I believe, is sort of an ability. Valor is like an ability that you can use. Okay. Alright, so as I was saying, you can, when you're leveling up your character during the fellowship phase, you can spend points to get a point in Wisdom or Valor. Wisdom grants you a virtue, and Valor will grant you a reward. So if you put some experience into Valor, it'll grant you a reward, and if you put it into Wisdom, it'll grant you a virtue. So a virtue is sort of like, look at Swordmaster as one of the virtues. It says here, when you are fighting in a defensive stance, you get a bonus to your parry equal to the encumbrance rating of your sword, either a sword or a longsword. So you can see it's giving you a bonus to your parry, and we can cover what parry is and how combat works later in the video. But and there's also combat stances, etc. But yeah, so that's just Wisdom and Valor. So this will just show you here what they say here. That's how virtues work. And then if you go over just a few pages, you see here's all the different virtues, and here's rewards. So you can improve the standard of your equipment. You get different cultural rewards, and here they list where the cultural rewards are. Yeah, you can see a close-fitting armor. Here's a grievous weapon, keen weapon, a foul weapon. So those are, I believe, common ones. So these are just called qualities. And then you get the cultural ones for bardings or dwarves. Okay, so those are rewards. And you get that at the beginning when you roll up your character. You get to choose if you want to put 2 points in Wisdom and 1 in Valor, or 2 in Valor and 1 in Wisdom, and that kind of gives you the you get to choose one of those rewards during character creation based on which one you put 2 points in, and the other one just gets 1, and whichever one you put 2 points in, if it's Wisdom or Valor, you get that virtue or reward. Okay, that makes sense. So if I put 2 points in Valor and 1 in Wisdom, I'm going to get a reward for Valor during character creation. If I put 2 in Wisdom and 1 in Valor, I will get a virtue. Okay, that's just during character creation, but in fellowship phase, when you upgrade them, you get, for valor, you get a reward, for wisdom, you get a virtue. Alright, cool. Okay, let's cover how to play, general structure. Here's the map of Wonderland. That's a small slice of Middle Earth. This area falls under sort of another area called Rovanian. Okay. Alright. So here's a character sheet. Generally you're rolling on your common skills. Unless you're in combat, then you're rolling on whichever weapon you're choosing to use. And that's generally what you're doing in the game. You're rolling on your common skills or you're rolling on your weapon skills. Okay, so in the game, your target number, the number you're trying to reach, is 14. Your TN 14, target number 14. And you start off with a D12. So you've got 12 sides to this dice, but you're aiming for 14, which seems unfair. But if you've got no ranks in a particular skill, so let's just say you're trying to persuade somebody, you've got no ranks, you would roll, and if you land on a Gandalf rune, just seeing over there, if you land on a Gandalf rune, that's an automatic success. So you have a 1 in 12 chance to succeed if you've got no ranks in persuade or any of the other common skills. So you have a 1 in 12 chance to succeed at something that you've got no skill in. So that's quite fun. If you don't get a Gandalf rune, and let's just say you roll 10 and you're trying to get 14, you can spend a point of hope from your character. That sort of grants your character a little bit of a bonus. And how you work that out is you spend the point of hope, a single point, and that lets you draw on your wits. If it's you just did persuade, you look under that column, okay, that falls under wits, you can add your wit score to your roll. If your skill is underlined, which means it's a favored skill, you can use your favored wit skill, which is a larger version of your wit skill. So it's a beefed up version of your wit skill. So if it's underlined, you get to use the favored. If it's not underlined, you get to use the normal. And that's how hope works. So hope lets you add that amount to your roll's total. Okay, so that's you can kind of boost it, even if you've got no ranks in persuade and you didn't roll a Gandalf rune, you can still spend hope to take you across the line. But generally what you would be doing is you would get ranks in that skill. Every time you get a rank, you get to add a d6 to your dice roll. And I just rolled 5, and I probably wouldn't even spend hope, because let's just say my wits is 5 and I just rolled 5, that's 10. It wouldn't get me across the threshold, which the target number is 14. But if I rolled a 10 and I rolled whatever, a 5, it's 15, I pass the target number, I succeed. If I rolled just under, which is 13, I can spend a point of hope, draw my wits, and push it over that line. Another thing to keep in mind is if you ever roll a 6, where is it? And your roll is a success. So if you rolled a 10, let's just say, and you rolled the 6, so you rolled 16, target number is 14, you passed, but you got a 6. So what that 6 does for you, it's got a Gandalf rune on, a Tengwan rune on there, excuse me, and like most games, when you roll a 6 on a d6, it's a good thing. So that makes your success a great success. If you rolled two sixes, it makes it an extraordinary success. Okay, so you have you got a regular success, a great success, and extraordinary success. How that works is a regular success is basically the baseline, what's required to pass a certain skill check. If you get a great success, you get to add an advancement point to this skill group. So the same way we were looking at, if you were using persuade and you wanted to draw on your hope, you looked up to your wits. So that's, you look up when you're spending hope, you see, okay, it falls under wits. Let's just say you were doing healing, you look up to heart and you draw on your heart attribute. That's when spending hope. When you get a great or extraordinary success, you get to add an advancement point. It's kind of like experience, but it's another form of experience. you add it to that row. So if I just did persuade, I add it to the personality row. If I did healing, I add it to the survival row. So for the first time in your adventure phase, which lasts about 3 gaming sessions, the first time you roll a great success, you add 1 point you color in that first point, because that's the first time you got a great success. If you get an extraordinary success, which is 2 6s, you color in the second dot. The third dot isn't actually for when you get three 6s. That's not actually part of that calculation. The third dot's actually reserved for when you pass, regardless of if you get 6s or not. As long as you pass the roll and you use your character's trait, which is it's a defining feature of your character. When you roll up your character, you do character creation, you get defining features, and you can draw on that trait. It's like a description. Maybe your character is very good at smoking, and he's trying to conceal himself. Maybe you're rolling stealth, and you pass the stealth roll, and you use how you used your smoking trait to conceal yourself in the tavern. You would get to color in that third advancement point. So the first one is for a great success, second one is for an extraordinary success, the third one is when you use your trait as sort of flavor description. You get awarded an advancement point. That's regardless if you did Awe, Inspire, or Persuade, because they're all 3 on the same row. That applies, and you can only do that once. You can obviously narratively use trait to describe your roles as much as you want to, but in your adventuring phase, which is 3 sessions, you only get awarded a point once for each of those different defining moments, and those points are at the end of your adventure phase. It's called the fellowship phase, and those points get tallied up here to your advancement points and get cleaned. That gets wiped, and you get to do that again in the next adventure phase. You try to tally up those amounts, so you can fall in all 3 for all the skill groups if you're that lucky. And that's why it's a good idea to try to use your skills as often as possible. But just remember, if you fail a roll, the game master, they call it a law master, so your GM would give you a negative outcome if you fail. So there is a risk, but the more you roll, the higher chance you get to gaining these points. And these points is what you use to upgrade your common skills. So the first point in Persuade, the first rank, will cost you 1 advancement point. But if you're trying to upgrade it to, let's just say you're already rank 2 and you want to upgrade to rank 3, it'll cost you 3 points to get rank 3. Even though you're on rank 2, it'll cost you 3. So if you're on rank 3, and you want to go to 4, you have to spend 4 points to upgrade to 4. And you can't just jump straight through to rank 6 and spend 6. You have to do each tier one at a time and spend the full price. So if I'm on tier rank 5 and I want to get rank 6, I'm going to spend 6 advancement points to get there. At the end of every game session, you get awarded experience points. That goes up here. And in the fellowship phase, you get to spend your advancement points and upgrade your common skills, and you also get to use your experience to upgrade your valor, wisdom, or weapon. How you get experience points is at the end of each game session, each game night. You get given 1 experience point. You can get given up to 2 if your party pursued their objective, and that's just something that you casually just inform the GM of at the beginning of the game session, saying our fellowship, our party are setting out to do this, and if you pursued that, then you get 2 experience points at the end of the game session. If you've deviated from that, you only get 1. Okay, so it's also important to remember, sometimes you actually don't need to roll a skill check. There's times when you actually your character has a trait that grants you an automatic success. So always keep that, it's actually here, automatic action. Keep that in mind. A trait can just completely overrule the need for a skill check. So there's an automatic action, which is the case where you just invoke a trait and it automatically grants you a ordinary success. There's unforeseen action, so there's times when something might happen narratively and you can just go, hang on, I'm invoking my trait, which means my character would have picked up on that, and you can kind of intercede. And I've covered just recently where you can use a trait to buff a roll. So if you did roll, you can then say, okay, my trait, you can use your trait as flavor, as I explained earlier, to gain an advancement point. In that case, it doesn't help you pass the success, it just allows you to access that advancement point. But the first 2 year is a way where your trait actually serves a function, where it grants you automatic success or it helps you intercede in the narrative and grant you favor. So you'll see there's a whole list of distinctive features and special abilities. Now you get distinctive features and special abilities, they come up when you're designing your character, but essentially they're all like traits. Just think of them all as traits. So whenever you see something under special abilities or see them under distinctive features, they are all traits, and you can invoke those as I explained. So here's this page after page just explaining sort of the names generally tell you what the trait does, but if you want to just kind of if you're not sure, you can always just turn to the book and just double check if you understand that trait correctly, or if that trait might be a good application for the current situation. So let's have a look. Something to keep in mind as well is when you form a group, a party, a fellowship, you develop a fellowship focus. So essentially you nominate someone in your party that you're going to how can I say be invested in. So you're looking out for them. It's like Sam looking out for Frodo. So you nominate somebody to be your fellowship focus, and essentially you're going to try to go out of your way to protect that person, because if you don't manage to protect them from a wound or suffering corruption, or like a bout of madness, that kind of stuff, you're not able to get a point of hope back. So at the end of each gaming session, then the beginning of the next session, you are granted a point of hope. But if your fellowship focus gets wounded, not injured, so they can lose endurance, but if they get wounded or suffer some kind of trauma, you don't get that 1 point of hope back. That means only at the end of the 3 gaming sessions there's a fellowship phase, and then you get hope back. All right. Something else to keep in mind is something that will refresh at the end of each individual game night, each game session, is your let's have a look. Where is the fellowship? I think that's the fellowship pool over there. Yeah. So you have a fellowship pool of hope, and that is shared. So you get 1 per party member. So if you've got 2 or 3 party members, you get 3 points of hope at the beginning of each gaming session, each gaming night. And that refreshes, so you can all just take from that if your hope is diminished. If your team feels they need to save it for later, they can decline your request to use that, although you can actually still use it. They can't stop you, but then you get a point of shadow, a temporary point of shadow. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. So I am going to just go through, let's have a look. So here's a whole bunch of things. It covers your general terminology, your glossary. Here it covers the dice, what we just discussed. Okay. Your skills and your attributes, your degrees of success. So you can, the DM, the Lore Master, can set the target number. Generally it's 14, but if they want to make it easier, they can drop it, or if they want to make it harder, they can increase it. On that note, you do get things like a prolonged roll, where the Game Master can actually set, say you need to obtain a target number of 14, but you have to get it within the next 4 turns or you fail. So let's just say you're trying to pick a lock, or let's just say you're trying to, you're weary, or let's just say you're suffering some sort of effect from something, maybe you're poisoned or something, and you have 4 turns to try to get into the boat, else you're gonna, fall in the water and drown, or there's some sort of sense of urgency, and you have 4, or the DM can set how many attempts you have at that, and they'll set the target number, and you'll roll, and if you fail, there's a negative consequence, but then you're still in the in the battle, you're still in the struggle to maybe not drown, or get help if you're poisoned, and you'll try again. Once you succeed that threshold, then it's considered failed, and maybe you do drown, or the DM can decide the severity of that. Maybe you just get washed downstream, you lose all your gear, or if you get poisoned, maybe maybe you end up going blind in one eye, or whatever it is. There'll be a negative consequence if you fail that. But yeah, a prolonged roll is quite a nice change of pace for when you're rolling things. It's really fun to do for players. At the end of the campaign, or the adventuring phase, which is basically 3 play sessions, you go into the fellowship phase, where you basically sit down, and it's the off season. Say winter, you're no longer adventuring, and players basically invest their experience points, they invest their advancement points, and they get to do what is it called during the fellowship phase? We'll have to check quickly. Let's have a look. Here we go. There should be, there's the War Master, but there should be the Fellowship. There we go. So the thing we're looking for is Undertaking. Alright, so you basically get to do an Undertaking in the Fellowship phase as well. That's something you get to do. And Undertakings, there's different Undertakings in different areas. So the different source books list different undertakings for different areas, so that's quite nice. It gives you nice flavor and reason to go and explore Lake Town or Bree, any of those areas. There's multiple. When you go into battle, you roll battle, and it's basically a battle check. So you want to see how prepared you are for that battle, and you roll your battle common skill to a target number of 14. If you pass that, you then get 1 additional d6 you can add to your roll. So if, let's just say your weapon skill, you have 3 points in your weapon, so you roll your d6 plus those 3 points, and at any stage of the battle you can add just 1 extra dice, just for 1 roll, but you must add it before you roll. So you can't roll and then realize you haven't got enough and then decide to spend it. You must roll it all at once, and that is your roll. So that's at the beginning of the battle. When you do a battle check, that is what that's for. If you get a 6 on your roll, let's just say you rolled a 10 and you rolled a 6, which means you passed the target number of 14, but you got a 6 attaining 1 rune, then you get 2 additional dice to use. So it's basically I think they call it is it advanced dice? think it's called advanced dice. It's basically support dice. And if you get, so that's a great success. If you get an extraordinary success, so that's 2 6s, then you get to add 3 dice. Am I right? Yeah. So if you pass a normal check, it's 1 dice. If you get a great success, it's 2 dice. If you get an extraordinary success, it's 3 dice. You get to add 3 dice. You can spend them, I believe, all at once or at different times. So once you spend them, it's spent and it's only limited to that battle. So once the battle's finished, that support dice, those advanced dice, or assist dice, I think they're called assist dice maybe, go away. The same thing applies to when you go into an encounter, which is like a dialogue conversation. You roll insight to see how much you can glean about this person beforehand, and you get additional dice similar to how you would in battle. These assist dice to aid you, and you can spend them, but you have to commit them before you roll, and that goes away after that dialogue exchange, that encounter is finished. Okay. All right. Now that we've covered prolonged rolls, it's actually important to discuss encountering dialogue interactions. So in the One Ring, when you encounter an NPC or a non-playing character, so lesser importance or more importance, I believe I've covered that you need to roll an inside roll, and that's how you get your assist dice. And if you roll great or extraordinary, you get 2 assist dice or 3 assist dice. Now, something to keep in mind is how you engage in a dialogue encounter. So battle's got its own rules regarding who's going to have initiative, and there's ambush, and there's opening volley shots, those kind of things. Now with dialogue, you don't have to follow these rules strictly because they can become quite rigid. So that's a nice thing of role playing. You can sort of see what flows nicely for you. So this is the suggested sort of table for when you do a dialogue encounter with an NPC. So you roll insight to see if you gain any encounter advantages, those assist dice. Once you've done that, you go to introduction. So you choose who's going to be the sort of spokesperson in this conversation. You know, more than one can be the spokesperson. Now, you can roll again for lore. Now these are on target number 14. So insight was target number 14 to see if you got any assist dice. Lore is on target number 14. What you get from that, it just tells you which of these 3 will help you make an impression on the stranger. So you can roll awe, courtesy, or riddle, and that can help and aid you when dealing with that NPC. So that they'll grant you favor with that NPC in role-playing terms. So the NPC, the GM can factor that in, that if you impress them or not. Okay, so you're basically introducing yourself. Once you've done that, then only the people who's introduced themselves can go into the next step, which is interaction. This is basically the normal skill rolls you do when speaking to somebody. So once you've done your insight, which gave you your assist dice, then you do a lore roll. It helps you decide which introduction to use, and then you roll on the introduction. Then the third step is, like I said, the casual, normal, common skills. So you roll insight if you want to observe or evaluate something, inspire if you want to address crowds or uplift people, persuade if you want to make a point, riddle if you want to gather information, song if you want to get approval. So this encounter structure, generally what we've been using is just re-roll insight to see if we get any assist dice, and then we go straight through to the common skills, which will decide if you want to persuade somebody, or if you want to inspire them, So we kind of skip the introduction step because there's 2 additional roles there, and that's just sort of just how you should introduce yourself, and it helps you choose which one, and then you roll on that one. And we normally leave that step out, but yeah, as far as rules go, that is something you can use if you find it beneficial. And keeping that in mind, when you're having a conversation with somebody, you normally set that NPC as a threshold. So if you're trying to persuade them, or if you're trying to get something out of them, or whatever it is, if you want to intimidate them, the game master will set a threshold, and you can attempt certain common skills against that person to achieve your whatever you're trying to achieve, but there's usually a threshold. So if you failed 4 times, that person's no longer going to want to deal with you. They sort of shut down, and there is negative consequences each time you fail a roll, and you actually can't keep attempting the same roll over and over within the one instance in the one account, or you can't just keep trying to persuade. You get to do it once. If it failed, you'll have to take a different approach. So hopefully that helps with that. Okay. So when looking at combat, you need to ask yourself, are you being ambushed, or are you going to ambush somebody? That's actually quite an important question to ask, and you should consider that each time you're going to enter combat. So naturally, if you want to ambush somebody, you would have thought ahead and made the necessary actions and decisions beforehand. So it's quite clear if you're going to ambush somebody. But if you've entered combat, you need to ask the question, have you been ambushed? So essentially how that works is your group, your party, it's referred to as a company. And if your company is being ambushed, all the heroes in your company needs to roll either awareness, battle, or hunting. So they can choose which one they want to roll. If they fail that roll, they individually get, how can I say, have to pass or fail that surprise test. So some of your company members can pass the test, some can fail it. And I'll explain to you what that actually means. So if your company member fails the test, so if they're rolling for, say, a target number 14 and they get 3, and even spending hope when they can maybe try to spend hope, but they can't get across across the target number, meet or cross the target number, then they're considered to be surprised. So the negative impact of that, apart from role-playing that, is the companion, that character, let's just say it's your character, was surprised. You then can't roll for combat advantage, or you can't do opening bodies. So normally, like I explained, in combat you roll at the beginning of the combat for combat advantage, and that grants you success dice, which you can then use during combat. When you make a roll, you decide to commit those dice before you roll. If you've been ambushed, you can't roll that preliminary roll of battle, which helps you gain those success dice, which you can use later. So if you fail the ambush test, you can't roll for battle. That means you can't have that opportunity to gain those dice. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's that individual character failed that surprise test, that ambush test. But if his companions, his party members, pass the test, then they can roll for combat advantages or do their opening volley. And if they've passed the test and got and rolled a 6 during their test, let me just get that in the middle. If they got a 6 or 2 6s while doing that skill check of awareness, battle, or hunting, then they can warn one of the team members, or if they got 2 6s, they can warn 2 of their team members. So let's just say your party consists of 4 people, and 2 pass and 2 fail, and one of the people that pass actually rolls 2 6s. He can actually warn those 2 fellow members that failed. That way everybody can do their preliminary battle roll before they go in battle, and hopefully gain success dice, which they can use later in the battle. They must just then commit those dice before they roll, they decide, I'm going to use one of those dice and I'm going to roll it now. And they only get to use it once. So it gets spent, it gets depleted. All right, so that's how being ambushed works. Then if you want to ambush an enemy, naturally you would plan ahead. And the heroes in your group have to roll either stealth, battle, or hunting. And everybody in your company, your group, has to pass that test. There's no room to fail that. So being ambushed, even if your fellow members don't roll a 6, some of them can pass, some of them can fail, and the ones that pass get to do their battle preliminary roll and get to do combat opening volleys, and whichever characters fails don't. But with an ambush, everybody has to pass. So if some fail, the only way of getting them across the line is, once again, if some of the people that passed rolled 6s, then they can get one team member to meet the target number, or 2, and they can assist their companions. Okay, so hopefully that explains ambush. Now there are a couple of rules regarding ambush, just the target number. So if you are being ambushed, there's tables on page 168 that they basically just cover the narrative sort of situations that you would be in. If you are being ambushed, there's certain target numbers that you would consider, okay, they really caught you off guard, it's going to be a target number of 18. But if they, if there's still a chance, like if you've maybe got a lookout, or you're advancing in an area which is unfit for ambushing, but they're still ambushing you, then the target number's 12, which is lower. But if they catch you completely unawares, then it's 18. So that's the target number range for being ambushed. And then if you are ambushing someone, they also give you a table for what your target number is, just to assist to make that feel more relevant to the role playing and to the narrative, if it's going to be hard to ambush somebody or easy. Okay, so let me just cover, we've covered ambush. Let me cover initiative. Initiative is important. Essentially, it determines who goes first, and if you have initiative, your target number is lower. If you don't have initiative, your target number is higher. And that's only a target number for your preliminary battle roll. So that roll that you make to see, I'm just going to put this in here, that roll that you make as you go into battle, you roll on your battle skill to see if you gain any success dice, which will aid you later on. And then you get to, those, like I explained earlier, those are one-off dice you get to just add to your roll and use, and then they're exhausted. Those are called your success dice. And if you have initiative, when you do that preliminary battle roll, your target number is 14. If you don't have initiative, when you do that skill check before you go into battle, you roll on battle, your target number is 18. So initiative only affects who gets to attack first, and how difficult it is for you to do that preliminary battle check for those additional success dice. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense what initiative is. So first you have ambush, then you have initiative, and initiative directly impacts your battle roll and who gets to go first. So if your company's defending, they automatically get the initiative. If your company is attacking, the enemy gets the initiative. So if you're defending, your target number is 14 and you get to attack first. If the enemy's attacking, they get to attack first, and your battle roll, that preliminary battle roll's target number is 18. Okay, so defending, preliminary battle roll is target number 14 and you get to go first. Attacking, your preliminary battle roll is target number 18 and the enemy gets to go first. If you're unsure whether your company is considered attacking or defending, you can do what they call a opposed roll, where you roll on your in your party, you choose the companion with the highest battle rating, and you have that companion roll. Let's have a look. So we just have here. Yeah, so you basically roll you assign one of your companions in your group with the highest battle roll. You have them do a battle roll and see what score they get, and you have the enemy do a battle roll and see what score they get, and whoever gets the highest score wins the opposing roll. They get given initiative, and like I said, that means for the next step, where you do your battle check, you do your preliminary battle check, your target number is going to be lower. It's 14, and you get to attack first. So when doing the enemy's opposing roll, if you're trying to figure out if they've got the initiative or you do, you get to use your battle rating, one of your companions. But for the enemy, you must use their vocation rating under skills. Okay, so they'll essentially, their vocation represents, let's just say in this instance, battle. So they have 3 in battle, where let's just use one of the pre-rolled characters. Let's use this dwarf. His battle is 2. Okay, so we'll just do a roll with 2 6-sided dice and see what he gets. He gets 8. Okay, and the monster or enemy, that he had 3, so we'll add 3 6-sided dice, 3 d6s to the pool with the d12, and we'll roll that, and he just needs to beat 8, and yeah, he's d12 already hits 8, and then he got an additional 7, so he's sitting on 15. So the enemy then would gain initiative. So straight after determining if they were ambushed or not, you're determining initiative, and then after initiative, you guys get to do your regular preliminary battle check to see if you get advanced dice. In this case, they failed to get the initiative, so they still get to do their battle preliminary check, but that battle is going to be at the target number of 18. So this dwarf is going to take his d12, his 2 d6s, he's going to roll, but he needs to get 18. And that's Sauron, that means that's 0, and so he got 11. So he doesn't get any success dice to aid him in the battle. Those are those additional dice that just sit there in a reserve pool for you to add to your roll before you roll, and then it exhausts them. Okay, so it's a one-time use. Just remember, if you were ambushed, then you don't, regardless if you get initiative or not, you don't get to do that skill check for battle, that preliminary battle roll. So to walk you through it, it's rather simple, but there's several steps in this. So you have ambush, which we're doing to figure out if you surprise the enemy or not, or if you've been ambushed. Now, if you've been ambushed, then you don't get to do an opening volley, and you don't get to roll for a battle check, your preliminary check, those additional dice. So if you fail, if you're surprised, you do not get to do that. So the next step is determining initiative, who gets to attack first, and how hard that battle check will be. But if you failed your ambush, if you were surprised, you still do the initiative to figure out who attacks first. But how hard that preliminary battle check is going to be is irrelevant, because you already failed the ambush. You've been surprised. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies that. Okay, and to clarify what an opening volley is, opening volleys is essentially just before you go into close combat. Any of your companions that have a bow or spear have the opportunity to take a shot. It's called an opening volley. And if you have a spear, you get to do it once. If you have a bow, you get to do it once. If there's a great distance between you guys, between your party and theirs, you get to do 2 opening volleys. And just to remember, you only get to do that if you're not surprised, if someone didn't ambush you. Okay, and your target number to hit somebody when you're doing an opening volley is 12 plus their parry rating. But then you also add their shield to that parry rating as well. So it's the target number is the enemy, it's 12 plus the enemy's parry rating plus if they have a shield. Now if the enemy is not surprised, if they're aware of you attacking them, then you get to double their shield modifier, because essentially they're holding it up and shielding themselves as they're coming in. Okay. Alright. So engagement is similar to, you can basically think of engagement as assignment. So if there are more enemies than heroes, the lore master, the GM, gets to assign an unengaged enemy to an unengaged hero. Okay, so engagement is like assignment. So if there are, let's just say these are the enemies, these are the heroes. If there are more enemies than heroes, the lore master gets to assign who attacks who, and they can the lore master can be tactful and strategic about who he would like to engage, which enemy to engage which hero. But essentially they first start by engaging unengaged heroes, and then whoever's remaining they can assign to join in that fray with that hero, or they can hold them back and use ranged attack. Similarly, if there are more heroes than enemies, the players get to assign who they want to assign to which enemy. They first start by assigning them to unengaged enemies, and then they can assign additional ones to that enemy. Now there is limitations, so essentially a hero may be simultaneously engaged by up to 3 human-sized opponents. So if this is a hero, he can actually face 3 opponents. Okay, there we go. So a hero can face 3 opponents, that's the limitation. Human-sized opponents. Or 2 large creatures. So if it was, say, like two big trolls, they can face a human. A human can face 2 large trolls. I wouldn't want to be that guy. Enemies may engage up to 3 companions. So if this is an enemy, they can engage to 3, which is basically just the inverted of what I said. So it's the same rules apply. Or they can face up to 5. If they are a troll. Okay, like a large creature, or a troll or a dragon, they can face up to 5. So just to recap, human can face up to 3, okay, or they can face 2 large creatures. An enemy can face up to 3, or if it's troll, it can face up to 5, okay, or dragon or whatever, okay. And like I said, if there's more enemies, they get to choose who they assign. If there are more heroes, they get to choose who they assign. Okay, so let's just quickly zoom through here. So there are things like your, let's talk about combat. So during combat, let's go have a look at a character at the back. How does combat work? Let's find a pre-made character sheet. So let's have a look at, for example, this Hobbit. Hobbit's to the Shire. So this Hobbit, they've given him a bow of 5. So if he's in combat, he gets to roll, where is that? D12, there we go, the D12. He's to roll a D5. Sorry, a D12, and he's got 2 in bow, so that's two D6s. He gets to roll 3 dice. Okay, so alright, so he gets a 10-1 rune, that's an automatic success, and a 4 and a 3. Alright, so I believe a 10-1 counts as a 10, but it's automatic success, and that's 17. So when he's trying to hit his enemy, he's going to do 5 damage. Okay, I'll explain now what his target. I'll get to the target number now. So we have to try to figure out what we're aiming for. Because the target number isn't just 14, as you might think. It's not actually the case. Let's have a look here if we can find some monsters to face. Alright, here we go. So let's just say he was facing this Great Orc. The Great Orc's parry is 5 plus 2. Okay. So his parry is 7. Okay. I'm going to put this in here. When you're in combat, you get to choose what stance you want to take. Do you want to take forward, open, defensive, or rearward? Alright, so let's just go to those quickly and you get to see what that looks like. Let's just go to combat and see. There's the weapons. Let's have a look. Where is your stances? Because each stance actually has its own task you can do during combat, where you forfeit your attack and you use a task instead. So okay, that's just alright. I believe it would probably be just before this actually. There's that. There's the shadow. And I believe we are here. Okay. Rolling dice, resolving. Okay. So that's fellowship phase, so that would be the next one. Hopefully is combat. Adventuring phase. Yeah, task in combat. So you get to choose when the combat starts. You get to choose if you want to be forward, open, defensive, or rearward. When you're in those stances, you get to do different tasks. So if you're in forward, you can forego your attack and you can do Intimidate. And you roll either or battle, whichever one you have a higher skill in, you can choose to roll that one. So let's see what does it say. What does it say about intimidating a foe? On a successful roll, the enemy's morale has been shaken, and the opponents lose a total number of hate points. And see the box based on the quality of success produced by the roll. So if you remove their hate points, then they can't use their abilities, and in some cases you can even cause them to flee if they've got not enough hate points. You can't do an attack as well. If you're in open, you can rally your comrades, and that's inspire or song. That's what you roll on, either on your inspire skill or your song skill. Then opening stance, you can do rally comrades. And if the roll is success, all fighting companions who suffered a loss of endurance during the current combat, including the rallying hero, recover a number of endurance points based on the quality of the success. So it's essentially like a healer. So that's open stance. When you're in defensive, you can protect a companion. You don't have to roll for that. You believe you spend a point of hope. So we'll see what it says here. When the protected character, so the character you've nominated to protect, is attacked, the protecting hero may choose to spend 1 point of hope and become the target of the attack in his place. The attack is resolved using the stance of the defending character to calculate its target number. Note that a hero who chooses this task may still attack when his turn comes. So you can actually have a look here. Forward stance, to intimidate a foe, so they can lose hate points. You can't attack. Open stance, when you want to rally comrades, which is like heal. Can you attack? No. So that replaces your attack action. But to protect a companion, you don't lose your regular combat action there. Okay. And prepared shot in rearward. It's when it's a hero's turn to take an action, you get to do that. You don't have to roll for that. I do a special roll. It's just you declare that, and you do lose your action there, but a prepared shot is like an attack. I'll show you now what a prepared shot does. If the player succeeds in a ranged attack during the following round, he is considered to have successfully achieved a call shot. So we've discussed call shots previously, and there's benefits from that. So you can it's a bit easier to achieve a called shot if you do a prepared shot when you're in rearward stance. It makes doing called shots easier. Okay, but you can't attack that round, so you spend a round preparing that. So I'll hopefully just correct myself there. So as a prepared shot, you spend a turn doing that action, and the following round, if you land a hit, it becomes a called shot. So that's like disarming someone's shield or forcing them to drop their weapon. And if you, in any of the stances, at the end of your turn, you can say you want to roll for escape. You want to escape the combat. It's at the beginning or the end of a round. When it's your turn to take an action, you can roll for athletics. So you do that as an action. It replaces, you can't attack as well. You do that instead of your attack. Okay, so these are tasks you can do. So you can always escape combat, but you have to roll on athletics to escape the combat. So you have to roll on your athletics score. Now, if you're in rearward, you can automatically escape combat at the beginning of your next turn. You can, or is it the end? Either one. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but you can, when you're in rearward, you can escape combat without having to roll on athletics. But if you're in any of these stances, you, any of the other three, you can roll on athletics to escape combat. Now, with these stances, you have different target numbers. So, which means it's easier for you to hit them and it's easier for them to hit you. So here's your target numbers. And if you're in forward, your target number to hit you is 6 plus your parry rating, or 6 plus their parry rating. So you always add, if they're hitting you, you add your parry rating to their target number. So they must roll 6 plus, and this character's parry rating is, let's have a look here. His parry is 5. But then he's also got a shield, so his parry is 6. So it's 6 plus 6, the target number is 14 to hit this Hobbit, while he's in the forward stance. But he has to roll 6 plus, and let's see, what was that monster? Should have kept a little bookmark for that monster. Here we go. Not the Wolves of the Wild. Let's go back to the one we were looking at originally. I don't know if it was this guy. Yeah. Okay, so he, for the Hobbit to hit this Great Orc, he must roll 6 from his opening stance plus 7. Okay. 6 plus 7. So what is that? 13. Okay. So the target number to hit this Great Orc is 13, but the target number for this Great Orc to hit the Hobbit is 12. So it's easier for the Great Orc to hit the Hobbit, because the Hobbit's parry rating isn't as good as the Orcs. The Orcs is 5 plus 2, the Hobbit's is 5 plus 1, so the Hobbit's is 12. The Great Orc can hit the Hobbit. His target number is 12 to hit this guy, where the Hobbit has to get 13 to hit that guy. Hopefully I'm not over-explaining it at this point. Okay, then you have edge rating. Edge rating is basically on your weapon, it has an edge rating score. So you can see here's the Orc's weapons. Let's just say he's using a jagged knife. When it lands, if he successfully meets the target, the number, he does 3 damage on the poor Hobbit. And if he rolls an Eye of Sauron, then he does a wound, and 2 wounds knocks a character out. So let's try a different thing, different weapon. Say a bow of horn. If he meets the target number to hit that Hobbit, I believe was 12. He does 4 damage on the Hobbit, takes 4 endurance off the Hobbit, and if he rolls a 10 or above on the D12, it does a wound. So 2 wounds knocks out an opponent or a hero. Something important to know is keep in mind, in this game you lose endurance instead of health. So it's a clear distinction that has to be made, is endurance essentially is your health. affects your character's general energy. Their stamina is kind of tied into their endurance, and that's what we see here. So your endurance over here is kind of like your health, but there is actually another mechanic, which is wounds, and that's like a real sort of cutting blow, and that kind of goes through the armor, and if you get 2 of those, you're out of the game. You're knocked out, and there's rules about how long you can be knocked out before your character actually dies. So endurance is kind of in combat. Someone, bashes their sword against you, and you're struggling and wrestling and taking a knock here, and you have your wind knocked out over there, and you have to dive over there. It's sort of your energy, and you lose energy when they bash and knock on you. But if they get a piercing blow, you actually get a wound, and 2 of those, you're done for. Now, there is something else I want to just touch on, which is weapons. So the different weapons have different stats, and that's how you can decide if it's got first of all, how much endurance you take away from the enemy, but also what's the chances of getting a piercing blow. So I'm going to have a look at weapons, which is page 126. And here you can see there's this full breakdown of the weapons. And let's just say we're using a spear. It does 5 damage if I succeed on my attack, and I'll roll using my spear stats on my character sheet. It'll tell me how many dice I can roll, and based on my combat stance and based on my enemy's parry, I get my target number. If my roll with the dice on my character sheet for my spear, if that lands, I get to do 5 damage as long as it passes that target number, which is based once again on your combat stance plus your enemy's parry rating. You put that together, you have your target number. If your roll succeeds that, you do that damage. Now if your d12 that you've rolled is a 9 or above, it does a wound. Protection roll, alright. So when an enemy lands a piercing blow on you, which means they got the d12 landed on whatever requirement is, so let's just say we're trying to land a piercing blow on an enemy, we succeeded to meet the target number, so we've definitely done 5 damage, so they're -5 for them from the endurance. Then if our d12 landed on 9 or above, so that would be a 9. Okay, so 9 or above on the d12, then we have the potential chance to land a wound. 2 wounds on an enemy, they drop, they're out of the fight, and likewise for us. So have a look here on, it's called a protection test. So the enemy has a chance of doing a protection test. So rolled abilities, armor. So you're going to roll on your armor rating. So we'll go to Trotter quickly. Look at his armor rating. Come on, there we go. So the enemy's already hit us at this point with the spear. So we've done the 5 encumbrance damage. We now want to see if the armor that the Trotter's got is going to be enough to protect him. So we roll that 2 dice, because it's got a 2-year. Headgear would give you an additional dice as well. So we'll roll that d12 plus 2 dice to see if we can get the protection and meet the injury rating on the spear, which is 14. So we'll roll this, and okay, so we've got 18. So the enemy doesn't land a wound on Trotter, but Trotter does lose that 5 endurance. Okay, if we missed that roll, we could then spend hope, and we use the body, I believe. body is used to see if you can pass that test. If hope doesn't even get you past that, then, or if you don't want to spend the hope, your character takes a wound. Okay. If you roll criticals in the game, so those are 6 or 2 6s, and you pass the test, that means you get to add your character's attribute score, and in this case it would be body. So if you are doing another skill check, it doesn't count. So only if you in combat, I believe, does rolling additional 6s count towards the actual value, the target, I mean the output value. In other situations, when you're doing a skill check, it results in a better outcome as far as narratively or functionally, along with getting skill additional advancement points. But in combat, it directly takes your body score and adds it to your damage that you do. So 1/6 adds your attribute score once, 2 6s adds your attribute score twice. If your bow's underlined, it's not going to add your favorite score, it just adds your body score. Favorite score is only used for when you spend hope. You can recover health a few minutes after combat, and after a long prolonged rest, you can recover endurance. That's one way how you recover endurance. Now there are things like cold shots. It's a nice. There's some things you can do in combat which gives you some edge, and you can be strategic about it. So apart from spending hope, and apart from choosing your stance, you also, because obviously choosing your stance is important because you get to use those tasks associated with that stance, if it's forward or open or defensive. But you also have a thing called knockback. You can declare it if you've got injured. If an enemy attacks you and they injure you, or they've successfully rolled, you can call and you can claim a knockback, which halves the endurance loss that you would encounter, but then you forfeit your next turn. So you can be strategic about if you ever want to, use that ability and forfeit your next turn by halving the endurance you would lose. So that's called knockback. There's another thing called cold shot. Now, cold shot is you basically the same with knockback. You just declare it before you roll, and when you roll, you have to actually meet the exact target number or higher. So there's no spending hope, and you have to get a 6 on your roll. So it's really, really tough. And if you get an I on the D12, it's basically like a critical failure. It's a fumble, which means you lose your footing, and when an enemy attacks you, they only have to meet the target number, and they basically ignore your parry and your shield. If you have a shield or your whatever additional bonuses you have, they just have to go for your stance's target number if you fumble a cold shot. If you succeed a cold shot, so essentially a cold shot, what you're gaining from a cold shot is an additional effect. So if, say, you're using a cold shot with an axe, the target's shield has been smashed, so you can destroy somebody's shield like that. With a bow, the attack resulted in a piercing blow, regardless of the outcome of the feat die. So you kind of trying to commit to get a piercing blow, which means if you get 2 of those characters, the enemy's knocked out, so that's a wound. So a cold shot can help you land wounds. A mattock, the target's shield has been smashed, similar to an axe. Swords, the target drops their weapon, that's pretty fun. Spears, the attack results in a piercing blow regardless of the outcome of the feat die. So spears and bows, cold shots results are the same. They automatically give you a wound on your enemy. along with the endurance that the enemy is going to lose. And mattocks and axes help you smash an enemy's shield. If they don't have a shield, you won't get that effect. And swords help them, you cause them to drop their weapon. Okay. So in the One Ring, you always got to fall back to the reality that it's not just a narrative tale, or at least how we play it. There's a game underneath there too, and it's important just to remember what choices you have, how can you be strategic in your decisions, and how can you adapt to make better tactical decisions in the moment. So you won't always be in control of everything, but you can be tactical about it. And then in the larger view, you can kind of be strategic about, you know, your choices there too. So it's from everything from managing your hope to when you're going to combat, choosing your combat stances. Before that, maybe making a skill check to see if you can gain an advantage in stealth. During combat, after you've chosen your combat stances, there's things like before the battle starts, there's an opening volley, and you would probably take that. Why not? So that's not really a decision you have to make. But in combat, you can choose when you can do a cold shot, where you kind of over-invest, but to disarm them, remove their shield, remove their weapon, that kind of thing. If this character or enemy's shield or weapon's causing a problem, you can disarm them. If they come and attack you, then you can do a knockback where you take half the damage but you forfeit your next roll. And maybe you want to make that decision regarding to how the rest of your party looks. How does your health look? And then at the end of each round, you might want to change your combat stance. Maybe you want to step further back. Maybe you want to step forward. You could even try to escape the combat. And there's rules on how to escape the combat. And very importantly, during combat, you can intimidate a foe. Each stance is a different action or task you can do. Now you can encounter a bout of madness, and that is when, I'll show you now. Page 225. I'll go there quickly while keeping Trotter open. So, a Bout of Madness. Alright, I'll cover sort of, there's shadow in the game, so there's additional rules regarding blighted areas and shadow and doing misdeeds. So if you're making violent threats to somebody, a player makes violent threats, they get 1 point of shadow. If they're lying purposely or they're manipulating people, they get 2 points of shadow. If they're coward or they steal something, they get 3 points. If they show unprovoked aggression, to own authority, to influence or dominate somebody, then it's 4 points of shadow. And if they torment, torture or murder somebody or something, they get 5 points of shadow. So that's misdeeds. Okay. So, to recap, miserable. After misdeeds, okay. So you can get shadow. Then something to keep in mind is if your shadow keeps climbing and climbing and climbing, you get points of shadow. If your shadow score, I'll just go to miserable here. When your hope score is equal to or lower than your shadow rating. So if you've been spending hope, but you've been getting points of shadow, as soon as that hope is equal to or lower than your shadow, you consider it miserable. That's when you're at risk of experiencing a bout of madness. And how that happens is at any stage when you're doing skill checks and you roll, and your roll ends up on an eye, Sauron, you experience a bout of madness. Here we go, the Eye of Sauron, that one. When you experience a bout of madness, you lose control of your character. The GM gets to use your character for a while. There's a negative consequence there, narratively. Something's going to happen that's not going to be to your favor. And then you get a permanent point of shadow. Okay, so then all the shadow points are removed, but you get given a permanent point of shadow, which means it's going to make it more likely that you're going to go miserable again in the future. Okay. Okay, so important to remember when playing the One Ring is when the Lawmaster's role essentially is to give context, set up the campaign, give the players something to pursue, but sometimes even the players will raise questions or in some ways give you the information you need regarding to set up a new quest, an additional quest line, or help the story just take a different path. So it's quite collaborative, but definitely the Lawmaster is that responsibility mainly falls on the Lawmaster, and it's actually far less complicated than it might seem, because you've got all these regions and you can essentially just have your players explore Middle Earth and have them kind of put the narration back on them, ask them what their character's doing, what decisions are they going to make, and engage with them a lot. But yeah, you get to establish the setting and narrative hooks and issue quests, and essentially the Lawmaster, you can control all the NPCs. You know what their NPCs' thresholds are, and you speak for the NPCs. The player characters never control the NPC, they can only control themselves. So apart from making decisions and narratively and dialogue, having control over their dialogue and their characters' actions, when their character attempts something and they succeed or fail, it's vital for you to give the narrative control over to the player. They can't control the NPCs, and they can't change the outcome of what they wanted to achieve. So as a Lawmaster, you will declare that it's successful, and how, okay, fine, they were trying to achieve X, maybe they get X plus something else if they rolled really well. So you determine the core outcome, but then you hand over to them and you allow them to narrate and explain how that unfolds, and in that way you incorporate them in the storytelling, so they're not just in control of their actions and their dialogue, but narrating as well. So it's super important when doing dice rolls, if you succeed or if they succeed or fail, to pass the baton over to them and have them engage with the story and collaborate with you. And then when you get to the fellowship phase, once again, the emphasis is more on them. They can sort of tell what their characters are doing during this downtime, how they are tying that into their characters' personal motives, and maybe something unfolds during that fellowship phase that might become a new quest line for when you guys resume and go into the questing phase again. So yeah, just super important just to collaborate with and shift the storytelling role between the Lawmaster and the players, and the game mechanics helps tremendously with that, especially with just defining it clearly, where the Lawmaster is in control of the world and the sort of the time of year and the NPCs and stuff, but then the players are involved with their actions, their dialogue, and if they succeed or pass on a dice roll, how that narratively plays out. And then at the end of the questing phase, you go into the fellowship phase, and they just just continue to tell their story. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to cover journey rules. So normally journeys happen in the beginning of a campaign, but they can happen in the middle or at the end. It's up to the lore master. So something to just point out is that I'm looking at the journey rules in the core rule book. There are, let me just reach out here, just move these books. Right, and I'll grab, where is that? That's over here. Okay, so there are other rules for journey rules. That's this here, that's the journey and map rules. So they have revised the rules. I've yet to read this. So I'm working purely off the core rule book. And on top of that, there's a third version of the journey rules which came in the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition of the One Ring. I believe it's called Adventures in Middle-earth. And from the sounds of it, that is the preferred journey rules. So I still need to get to that, but for now I'm just going to cover the general journey rules. So one of the first things you would do in a journey is just assign a role to the individual companions. That doesn't really take a mechanical effect until later, but it's great for role playing. So they give you a little description of what that role is. So if you're going to take this journey and use theatre of the mind and role play this a bit more than just a mechanic, then it can become part of your tale, part of your campaign, or you can purely just use this journey phase as a way of calculating how it affects your character before your actual campaign starts. So it can purely be a mechanical, just a bunch of skill tests, and that's that. Or you can make it part of your narrative. Okay, but the first thing you do, so step one, is assigning a role. So if it's a guide, a scout, a huntsman, or a lookout man, and that's purely going to come into effect later in the journey. But like I said, it can form part of your narrative descriptions of your role playing while you sort of narratively talking through that journey phase. So, okay. So once you've assigned those roles, that's step one. Step two is calculating the distance, the kind of terrain you're covering, and how fast you're covering. Now, the reason why you're doing these three things is you basically just want to find out how many fatigue tests your character needs to do. So these fatigue tests are basically how their travel gear has impacted them. So let's just use this as an example. So we're going to I'm going to try and bring this close to the camera. So for this example, let's just say we are traveling from what is that? The nether marshes. So we're just traveling from the nether marshes to the upper marshes, and you've got to look at the color codes because it'll tell you that's the terrain. Okay, so each one of these hexes is 10 miles. So if I count from here to there, you normally would follow a path if you have to go around certain things like mountains. So you normally don't just go straight through, but you can calculate if it's worth maybe going over the mountain pass to avoid something, but normally you probably follow roads and paths. So if I count, there is 6 hexes here that's in the cream color, and that's considered easy terrain, and there are 5 hexes in the green color, which is considered moderate. Alright, so each one of those hexes is 10 miles. So I'll show you how we work that out. Okay, so we take those 10 hexes, the 6 hexes, that's 60, and we times it by how difficult that terrain is, and that terrain is easy, so it's 0.5. So we're left with 30 miles. So we covered, 30 miles worth of effort is that first bit of the journey, because it was halved because it was easy terrain. The second part of that journey was, so we're at 6 over there, so it's been reduced down to 30. The second part is 5 hexes, so that's 5 times 10, so that's 50 miles. And that is, we're going to multiply that by this region, that sort of type of terrain, and that's moderate, and that is times 1.5. So we're going to take that 50 and times by 1.5. So we've got 75 miles. So we've got the 30 miles and 75 miles. Put them together, you've got 105 miles. So that's, you're working out sort of how this is going to impact your character. So now that we've worked out the roles that they're each going to take, we've calculated the distance and the type of terrain that they're going to cover. Then we just need to work out how fast they're going to cover that terrain. And that's, here you can see if it's by foot or by riding horses or by a boat. So if it's by foot, for every 20 miles, it takes you a day. So we are just over 5 days, because we've got 105 miles. So that's going to just push us over into 6 days. Now, all that calculation, apart from just nicely seeing where we want to travel, we're just basically working out how that travel is going to impact our character. Are they going to arrive fresh, or are they going to arrive tired? What are they going to encounter along their journey? Because in Lord of the Rings, just the books themselves, from The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings novels themselves, the journey is a large part of the tale. So this phase, in many ways, shouldn't be overlooked, and if you can, try to incorporate it into the narration, not just calculating how it affects your character. But so here we're just seeing, okay, we're going to move from there to there. We've calculated the distance, we calculated what type of terrain they're covering, and now we're going to just figure out how we're going to use that information to work out how many days they've been traveling. And so we've worked out that that's 6 days. Now that we've got that amount, 6 days, that's essentially what we wanted. We wanted to know how many days are we going to travel. So those few calculations we did gave us that. Now we just have to ask ourselves, are we traveling in winter, spring, summer, or autumn? To make things easier, I'm going to say we're traveling in summer. It is better to travel in summer because you experience fewer fatigue tests. So that's what we want to work out. We want to work out how many fatigue tests we have to encounter. So traveling in summer, that's far better. So every 6 days we encounter a fatigue test. So in our case, we're going to encounter 1 fatigue test. Okay, so let's just have a look at our dice here. Before we roll that 1 fatigue test we need to do, just like a battle, just like a dialogue encounter, doing a journey, you get to roll on lore to see if you get any bonus success die that you can add to your roll. So you roll on lore. Okay, so I'm going to just use this dwarf that we looked at previously. Let's just use his stats to work from. Let's see, where is he? I believe he's right here, behind this page. No, there he is. So his travel, sorry, we're rolling lore. He's got nothing in lore. Okay, so we're rolling just purely a d12. He's got no points in lore. Okay, so to figure out what your target number is, you can just make it 14, or you can look at this region table, and that can also impact your target number. So if we look at the region we're covering, that falls under, you can see there's little symbols here, and that falls under wildlands, and the target number for wildlands is 16. So we're going to try to meet 16. So in our case, the only way we're going to get that, considering he's got no lore, is rolling a Gandalf rune. So let's check that. Nice roll, got 3. So he fails that lore test to see if he's going to get any bonus success die that he can add to his roll later. We could consider spending hope, but if we look at his lore, his hope would grant us 5 from wits, so that would bring us up to 8, still far from the 16, so we wouldn't spend the hope. Okay, so the next thing we would do, so now we didn't get any bonus success die, is we actually going to do that fatigue test. So let me just get that. So we're going to actually now roll on travel. So each of your companions need to do that initial lore roll to see if they get any bonus success die, but then they also need to roll, now that they're doing the fatigue test, they all need to roll on this fatigue test, and we've calculated we only need to do 1. Okay, so we need to roll on the travel skill. So we'll have a look at our dwarf, and he's got 3 in travel. Great. We've got no bonus success die, so we're going to grab our D12 and our 3 D6s, and we roll on that. Funny roll. So once again, I'm going to use the target number from this chart. You could use 14, but I'm going to use 16 because we're in the wildlands. So I'm trying to meet 16. So I've just rolled 15, that's 19, that's 21. Easily met that fatigue test. So my traveling gear didn't hinder my travels, and I didn't encounter or experience any negative effects from that. Had I failed that, so let's just say I rolled a bunch of, there we go, a 1, give me another 1 somewhere here, there we go, another 1, and 1 over here. Okay, so let's say that's my roll. I rolled 4. Spending hope's not going to help me. So if a companion fails their fatigue test, which means their traveling gear has sort of hindered them, then that hero immediately increases their fatigue score by the number equal to the encumbrance value of his traveling gear. So what that means is, so you have a fatigue score on your character sheet, and that comes from the gear you're carrying. So this dwarf's coat of mail is 16 encumbrance, his helm is 6, his mattock, his axe kind of thing, is 3, and his short sword is 1. So his total encumbrance, his total fatigue score is 26, but he's got a cultural blessing called Redoubtable, which lets him minus his favored heart score from that, so it brings him down to 20, which is quite a nice ability. So his fatigue score is 20. If he failed the fatigue test, he would raise that fatigue score, and he would raise it by 3 if we're traveling in autumn or winter. He would raise it by 2 if we're traveling in summer or spring. Okay, so where that fatigue score comes into play is, let's just say he failed it, and he failed it in summer. He would raise his fatigue score by 2. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So that would bring his fatigue score up to 22. All right. Now, what that fatigue score means is your character could become weary later on in the campaign. When your endurance score is equal to or lower than your fatigue rating. Okay, so if the character's endurance, he starts off with, say, 31, that's his endurance rating, so that you would write in 31 on a little printout sheet like this, in pencil, and if that endurance drops down below that amount of 22, or matches that amount of 22, your character immediately becomes weary. And what weary means is, if you ever roll dice while weary, and you land on any of these, let me actually put my hand in front of this. If you land on any of the dices that have a cream background on them, so the 1, the 2, or the 3, they equal 0. They don't give you anything. You'll see the 4, 5, and 6 have a dark background to them, so that you still get their values while your character is weary, but 1, 2, and 3 you get 0 from those. Okay, so you don't want to get weary, because essentially you want 1, 2, and 0s, produce a 0. So essentially that's what this fatigue test is doing to you. It's increasing your fatigue rating, which is going to make it even more possible for your character to become weary during the campaign. And narratively that makes sense, because the travel's been burdensome, and his traveling gear has weighed him down. Now, when during doing a fatigue test, if you at any stage roll an I, that immediately activates a hazard. Now that's once again a great opportunity for sort of your story, your narrative campaign, your narrative story. To you can use that as narrative fuel to add to your tale, but it has a mechanical effect as well. So I'll explain to you how that works. If at least one player gets an eye, your whole party experiences a hazard. Now what a hazard is, and just to remind you, when you're doing your travel roll, it's according to this chart here. So back to hazards. What a hazard is this is where your companions, the roles that you took on in the beginning, those individual roles that we took on, I'm just going to pull this up, we don't need that anymore. These original roles that we took on, guide, scout, huntsman, or lookout, it's going to come into effect now. So the GM would roll a D12. Okay, there we go, that's a funny roll. Okay, so this dice you can actually see what's a 6 or what's a 9 by that little circle underneath. So that's a 9, and as you can see there, a 6 has got the circle underneath the 6. So we rolled a 9. So that's going to mean 8 to 9 means the lookout man. It's going to affect the lookout man, and he needs to roll awareness. So let's just say that same dwarf failed. Let's just say that same dwarf, regardless of who rolled the Eye of Sauron, we've just rolled on the hazard, and the lookout man, this hazard affected the lookout man, and he needs to roll awareness. And we can basically find many ways of describing what that is. So let's have a look here. A dangerous predator has followed the tracks or the scent of a hunting companion. On a failure, the huntsman is attacked by an unusual, dangerous creature. Okay, so this hazard is a nice way, like perfect example to introduce an enemy that attacks you along your travels. So to see if it can avoid that, the huntsman would roll on awareness. Let's have a look what the awareness is. His awareness is, he's got 1 in awareness, so he gets to add 1d6. And yeah, your target number is probably, yeah, it says here, you can roll on a 14, or if you want to, you can once again use the table and make it 16. So let's make it 16 for this table. It's going to be hard. So we're rolling 16. And he rolled 11. Now he could spend, he just rolled awareness. So he can spend hope and add 6 to his roll. And he probably would do that. And he would take a point of hope from his sheet that he can add 6 to his roll. And because his awareness is underlined, he actually even gets to add 8. So he's rolled 19. So he passes the target number, which means he doesn't have to encounter that enemy during this hazard. So there was no enemy that had to be confronted. So you can have a look on this chart here. It breaks down some additional things for the hazards. So if you fail, okay, let me elaborate. So if the hazard has affected the lookout man. Okay, so now we've decided who it affects in your companion and what they need to roll on. So he needs to roll awareness. Okay, and look at his character sheet. He's got 1 in awareness. But now you need to consider what happens if he fails that awareness. Okay, so we passed that hazard. So we passed that hazard. So if let's just say we failed that hazard, we would then, you can choose, we can narratively say, okay, now you're going to have to fight that enemy. Or if you want to, you can kind of try to figure out on this chart what the outcome of failing that hazard is. So this from hunter to prey was a nice sort of little cue card, little introduction to an encounter or a battle with an enemy. But let's just say we didn't have that and we're struggling to find out what should the result be, what's going on. Okay, we know it affects the lookout man, we know he needs to roll awareness. You can add a little bit of text to that, but just looking at what the negative outcome is, it can also help you decide narratively what's happening there. So to figure out what the negative outcome, if he fails that test is you roll a d12, and that's an I. So it's a dangerous meeting. The law master improvises a combat encounter. So it's actually exactly the same that would have happened there, with this little blurb here which talked about an animal or monster hunting him. We would have gone and introduced the combat encounter there, but rolling on this d12, it actually suggested the same thing. So let's just try another one. 2. The negative effect for failing this awareness roll is he's becoming wary in his role of being the lookout man, and temporarily wary for the length of the journey. So he's experiencing that effect of becoming wary, where his 1s, his 2s and his 3s equals 0. So because he failed the hazard, he's going to encounter wariness, because maybe he's getting tired being the lookout man and it's really made him wary being out, whatever the weather is. Maybe it's really hot because it's summer and he's dehydrated, he's exhausted, the heat's getting to him, he's become wary. So that's a nice way of seeing who the hazard impacts, what they need to roll, and if you don't have a nice idea of what that hazard's going to be, you can just roll on this chart to see what the negative outcome is if he fails, and that could even help you figure out what the story behind this hazard is. Okay, and that only impacts that individual companion. So we passed our hazard check. There was no negative outcome because we spent the hope, so we managed to avoid the hazard. Okay, so we can maybe in your journey phase, you can talk your party, your players through that, explaining that maybe an animal followed the dwarf back, but the dwarf's awareness helped him to see it, and you guys chased it away. And you can just create a story about that, and you can have the players take an opportunity to explain how their characters react in that situation. Now there are other things like taking actions while traveling, and it's like resting, and generally if you take a long rest, it kind of brings your travel phase to a close. Okay, so in the One Ring, there are your basic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cultures. Okay, so in the One Ring you get your starting 6 cultures. You got your Bardings, your Beornings, your Dwarves of the Lonely Mountain, Elves of Mirkwood, Hobbits of the Shire, and Woodmen of Wonderland. Okay, so those are your 6 starting cultures, but they have added additional cultures throughout the lifespan of the One Ring RPG through supplements. So as they release new supplement books, they generally add 2 additional cultures from what I've seen. The Lawemaster's screen, you get a book called Lake Town Guide, and in this we get the Men of the Lake. That's an additional culture in this supplement. So Lake Town just goes into more detail regarding Lake Town itself. It gives you additional things to do. It gives you additional things to do during the Fellowship phase in Lake Town itself. Here's the Lawmaster screen. So unpack it like that. Some nice rules on that. Beautiful art on the back. Tales from Wonderland. This is a campaign book purely set to detail a specific campaign, a narrative tale for you to play through. It's pre-written, so you can see there it's purely a campaign book. Okay. So we've got Heart of the Wild, but they don't add any additional cultures in this one. This is a campaign book, so there's actually a campaign you can follow in this. So the lands of the rivers, they'll explain the regions. The greatest of the forests, there's history, and there's monsters of the wild. So basically, alright, so the Heart of the Wild is a collection of monsters for you to add, sort of enemies to add to your campaign, along with expanding on the regions. Some of the regions, let's have a look here. So basically the lands of the river and the forest, so the Vale of Anduin. So the supplement will just unpack that a little bit more in detail than what we saw in the core rulebook. Basically along the banks of the Great River and the trackless forest of Mirkwood to the east, so it goes more into detail into most of the regions that were touched upon in the core rulebook. Darkening of Mercury. No additional cultures added in this one. This is a pre-built campaign as well for you to follow with your group. This I haven't. Let's have a look here. So this campaign is less structured as the others. This is kind of just helps you, gives you sort of plot points to work through. I haven't worked through this one yet. It's quite a long one, but yeah, it's a bit of a different approach to the pre-built campaigns. It's more of overview, an eagle-eye view of a campaign and what's happening in Middle-earth than up-close focused campaign. So here's one, Rivendell, and in this supplement they've added 2 additional cultures, which is Rangers of the North and High Elves of Rivendell. See if I can show you that. Okay. So we got Rangers of the North and High Elves of Rivendell, and yeah, that's generally throughout the game. And Rivendell goes into more detail regarding Rivendell. It adds in rules regarding treasures, so how to make and magical items. So if you want to create weapons like Sting, this book will help you do that, along with unpacking more about the region of Eastern Eredor. They also touch on things like the Eye of Mordor and yeah, and some additional enemies in that one. And Ruins of the North, once again another campaign supplement, just additional adventures, 6 ready to play adventures. I'd come with this supplement, ready to go, ready to play. Okay. Hoslords of Rohan adds Dunlandings and the referred to them as the Rohirrim, probably. Riders of Rohan. So you got the Dunlandings and the Riders of Rohan. This goes into more detail regarding the Hoslords of Rohan, and and just the regions around that. So if you read this, you get more familiar with the regions of Rohan. Additional enemies. A very important one is mounts, how horse mounts work in the One Ring. Yeah, great book. Here we've got Bree. Alright, in this one, let's see which cultures they've added in this. So we've got Men of Bree is a culture they've added in this supplement. Okay. Okay. Bree includes details about Bree, but it also includes 3 additional adventures as well. Oaths of the Remark. Okay. No additional cultures in this one. Oaths of the Remark is a campaign book, so it's well, they like to refer to it as a supplement. It's a campaign supplement, so here's a pre-generated campaign for you to follow with your group. Here's Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. And here they add Dwarves of the Iron Hills and Dwarves of the Grey Mountains. Show you those. Okay, there we go. Dwarves of the Iron Hills and Dwarves of the Grey Mountains. Okay. This goes into more detail of areas surrounding the Lonely Mountain and covers new rules regarding dragons. Okay, so The Laughter of Dragons, this is purely an adventure or campaign book that adds 6 new adventures, new campaigns for you to play through with your group, pre-written, okay, just ready to go. Okay, so there's no additional cultures in journeys and maps. This includes a whole bunch of maps and additional rules on journeys. Here's the maps, the double-sided maps that come with journeys and maps. Adventurous Companion, yeah, it's just a nice overview of the game. It covers some of the cultures. There's no additional campaigns in this, but it does catalogue the different cultures quite nicely. I believe they add in some additional yeah, and they include some additional rules, new playable cultures. It's a collection from all the different supplements, so they've condensed all the different cultures that you might want in this book. So you don't have to go buy all the supplements. All the cultures that I've mentioned are in this book. Okay, so that is a wrap. I'll be really impressed if anyone sits through this whole thing. It was mainly created for myself to help me remember what I've learned and also revisit things that I possibly didn't understand. I did this especially because some of the rules are still fresh in my mind as I recently read it and tested out what I knew on the Eye of the Storm campaign, the first campaign that I've run in the One Ring, and essentially also helping me sort of store that information as I go across to the One Ring 2nd edition and start reading those rules. So yeah. Naturally, on our first campaign, we didn't get everything 100% right. Now doing this video, I can see some missed opportunities, but in the large part, I think we've tried to be pretty faithful to the rules, and we try to play it as it was intended. But yeah, with any first campaign using a new rule system, it does take a bit of adapting and sort of getting used to the system. So if I had to run a second campaign now, I would be far more familiar with the system, and yeah, I think I'll be more I'll be able to do the system more justice. All right, so yeah, I've just got some printouts of the second edition. I just love the art so much in this that yeah, I just printed some of these out. I'm just such a great fan. Such a great fan. I'm such a fan of just how great the illustrations turned out in the second edition, as I was with the first edition, and I'm really happy that the Kickstarter was a success, and I'm excited to see them do well in the commercial market, selling it in retail amongst the rest of the RPG books. So now's their moment to shine as second edition takes off. So keep an eye out for it if you haven't already backed it in Kickstarter. Yeah, keep your eye on the stores to see when it hits the shelves. And okay, so that's a wrap. Thanks for sitting through all this. If you did, hope you skipped through to the end. And yeah, I look forward to being a player in the second edition, as I won't be running a campaign, but I'll actually be a character in the story, and it'll be nice just to sit back and experience it from that lens, while taking in all the new rules and adjustments of second edition. So hopefully, yeah, see you on that side.